Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of AFCEA International, welcome to Day 2 of TechNet Cyber. Before we begin this morning's program, we have a few administrative announcements. Questions in the keynote sessions and the panel sessions will be taken electronically. You can email or text your questions to askmetncyber@gmail.com. Questions in the theater sessions will be taken via audience microphones. Signal Magazine's George Seffers will be blogging throughout the week, and his reports will be available on the Signal website. Additionally, recordings and presentations from the week's sessions that are authorized for release will be available after the event on the AFCEA website. Please note that AFCEA members may receive attendance documentation for CompTIA CEUs and or GIAC CPEs today. Consult the app or your show guide for details. If you're not a member, stop by the AFCEA booth, number 2112, to sign up today. At this time, please join me in welcoming to the stage Lieutenant General Bob Wood, U.S. Army retired, Executive Vice President, AFCEA International.
Well, thank you very much. We gave a couple extra minutes here. All the theater sessions, many of you were there, wonderfully attended. I'm glad the subjects were of interest to you, and we have a moment here to get the room separated from theater now into our great fireside chat, once again without a fire. I'm going to get a GIF or something, put a little thing up on the screen of a burning Yule log or something. But the format is tremendous. It allows a conversation between the panelists with a great moderator and obviously the ability to answer your questions. We've done well to this point with, I think, a wonderful first day. I think the traffic on the floor, the conversations on the stage, and the attendance by, frankly, a record number of attendees for this event. There you are. I knew they'd come up with something. We have the fireside chat all ready to roll then. We are very happy to see the traffic on the floor and attendance, and really looking at the solution providers are people who are at the booths out there, and they've got a lot of product, a lot of information, and a lot of creative innovation that they'd like to show you. So your attendance on the floor and your participation in the conversations in networking that we have are so important to all the people who come here in support and also in expectation that the conversation will be rich and useful. So far, so good, I believe. You know, we started yesterday with DISA 105. Now that means it's the fifth iteration of Mr. Montemurano's presentation about really the transformation of the network, transformation of mission sets, and all that DISA is doing to make those transitions effective and useful for the mission partners. Admiral Norton looked back across a year of activity, a remarkable set of things accomplished by the DISA team. And I think that was well presented, and then offered some challenges looking forward. And yet, that afternoon, challenge answered by a conversation between two very senior leaders in our department, Mr. Deasy and General Nakasone, talking together about the teaming that's occurred across the two of them as they came in now a year down with the department, looking at the critical functions of the DoD CIO and the Cybercom commander. All the PMs, we had about 2 hours of opportunity, about an hour and a half of opportunity for people who attended, our registrants, to take a time to talk to the program managers in DISA. That was successfully done yesterday. And if you look at the innovation showcases on the theater back here, you have industry presenting kind of unique takes on missions and problems and solutions. And those have been very well attended. We're thankful for that. Again, creative energy coming from industry, looking at the solutions required by our Defense Department. Now, a further recap of day one can be found on the Signal Show Daily, linked on the symposium website. Everybody should have that app downloaded. We really are trying to drive as much traffic and information to that. Hopefully you find it useful. You can go there and take a look at the coverage that's been provided, the blogging that's been done by the Signal team. As we move into the second day, I'd like to once again thank industry partners who have sponsored this symposium. As you see, it's a wonderfully rich number of technology and companies that are involved with the sponsorship, and of course we could not do this event without their support. As rapidly as technology is moving, as suddenly as problems arise, they react. and that's very evident as we look at what's being presented and what's being discussed. Without their support, this event couldn't happen. Now, the narrator mentioned benefits of membership with AFCEA related to continuing education. Let me draw your attention to the wing boards, where you can see a more complete list of member benefits. Now, if you're not a member, please visit booth 2112 to learn more about AFCEA. The surge in growth in AFCEA membership is evident, we believe, in the continued quality and presence of AFCEA and AFCEA partners, AFCEA members, and AFCEA chapters in the United States and across in Asia and in Europe. We're thankful that that continuing support we get from our chapters and members is echoed by the continuous support we get from our corporate members. As a reminder, please send your questions to the speakers in this room. It's Ask Me TN Cyber, TechNet Cyber. It's askmetncyber@gmail.com. The speakers up here certainly will have a rich conversation amongst themselves, but they depend as well on feedback from the audience. The questions are important. If your question doesn't get asked, we always save those questions and make them available to the panel members so they know what was interesting to you, may not with time. They're anxious to hear what's on your mind. And on your mind, I think, will be keyed this morning with a panel that we're very excited about. It's a first session addressing emergent technologies with some expertise on the stage, second to none. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome this morning's three participants to the stage to share their perspectives on this important topic. In putting together this session, we realized it was very important to hear from all three sides of the teammates who work to build out technologies and deliver capabilities. We have a representative from government, one from industry, and one from academia. I would say that our facilitator, our government participant, Stephen Wallace, you heard a little bit about, mentioned from the stage yesterday, and part of a key member of the DISA team. He's a Systems Innovation Scientist, Emerging Technology Directorate at DISA. Certainly we'll have some comments and thoughts about that position. Steve's DISA background includes serving as Chief Technology Director and Chief Engineer for DoD Enterprise Email and Defense Collaboration Services. Prior to joining DISA, Steve worked for CSC as a contractor, working in enterprise class collaboration, identity management, and authentication systems. Joining him from the academic world is Dr. Matthew Gaston, the Director of Emerging Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon University's Software Engineering Institute. Certainly well known, with a great reputation and a great partner with AFCEA for years. The Software Engineering Institute, his perspectives that he provides, he assists the U.S. Department of Defense and the intelligence community in identifying, evaluating, developing, and transitioning leading-edge, data-intensive, scalable computing technologies. Data came up about 6 times at least in the conversation between General Nakasone and Mr. DC. So that should be an interesting set of perspectives he has today. He's led the establishment and growth of ETC since January 2011, that's Emerging Technology Center. With his leadership, the ETC research portfolio has grown to include works in the fields of autonomy, biometrics, analytics, and visualization. From industry, we have Mr. Fletcher Previn, Chief Information Officer of IBM Corporation. Fletcher's focus as CIO is creating an agile culture to enable the innovation and pace of the best small technology companies with the scale of IBM. Great mix. He has responsibility for delivering a productive IT environment to IBM's 380,000 worldwide employees, as well as 130,000 contractors and 100,000 business partners. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the panel as we begin our discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So before we get started here, it wouldn't be a fireside chat. I brought some fire logs here. And then at about 11 o'clock last night, I shot out of bed and my wife wondered what happened. And it wouldn't be a fireside chat without s'mores, right? But these were from last year, guys. So I wouldn't put your health in jeopardy by eating any of the marshmallows. All right, so we've got some, I think between the three of us, we've got some really interesting jobs in our respective organizations. We get to do a lot of things, work with a lot of different technologies. One of the questions that I had for you guys that I was curious of is how do you evaluate new technologies to bring into the organization, not even just technologies, potentially techniques, those types of things. How do you evaluate them to bring them in and then put them on a pathway to eventually transition? Or, you know, maybe you bail and it's not a successful technology. So what are some of the ways that you all do that?
Well, I'd say on the IBM side, one of the changes that we made was how we were organized. We got rid of the two-speed IT kind of construct where some people are supposed to innovate and other people are just supposed to run the operation the same way every day. And that really sort of was creating a class system of haves and have-nots. And so by putting it out there that innovation is really part of everybody's job, and good ideas can and will come from anywhere in the organization, it moved it into, it's got to be a practical business problem that you're solving with the technology because you're going to be the person responsible to execute and operate that mission. So, you know, this is the kind of never take advice from anyone who doesn't have to live with the consequences. We don't have sort of things falling from above and then trying to figure out how to make it real. It's the teams that are really having the delivery responsibility making those calls. And then that also flowed into how we do our business case and planning for the year in terms of funding and business cases around what projects get delivered. Most organizations dive in indigestion, not starvation. So what we say no to, in a lot of ways, is more important than what we say yes to. And that gave us much better discipline around what technologies we embrace and make real.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, and I don't recall who to attribute it to, but recently, that good ideas have no rank, right? They come from wherever, and a good idea is a good idea no matter what. Now,
So we have a very, I have a very different perspective than Fletcher as a CIO of a major corporation. I'm at a government research lab at a great academic university. Our mission, right, as a government research lab is really to understand new technologies and how they can affect mission capability, provide leap ahead mission capability. And Fletcher said something right in the beginning that I think is spot on. You have to start with a business case. In DoD speak, you have to start with a mission case. And you'll hear this as a theme from me. It's not about the technology, it's about the problem. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to solve? What's the data you have available to you? Being at a place like Carnegie Mellon University, I'm sure we'll talk about AI at some point today. I'll use AI as an example. CMU has 300 faculty working in artificial intelligence. I could very easily get distracted by all of the shiny objects that they're creating all of the time, the amazing new technologies. But the point is, I think when you're evaluating new technology, you've got to be problem-driven, mission-driven, business case-driven, and that's the key. And then our approach following on to the problem is really hands-on. We do very aggressive hands-on evaluations. Everything's done very incrementally, so you know when it's going to work, when it's not going to work, when to make decisions to stop early on in the process.
okay. So kind of along those lines and following, our business tends to love hype, right? It's the technology of the day. We find something, we grab hold of it, and then the hype machine takes off. So how do you weed through that hype and get to the merit of a given technology and then get after the technology to then deliver?
So I'll foot stomp the same theme you're going to hear, right? It's about the problem. It's not about the technology. I can't tell you the number of organizations I've walked into and talked to about what we do, and they hear us use a phrase like machine learning. And the response is, yes, we want some of that machine learning. Everyone here is hearing about these technologies. There are amazing breakthroughs happening in the machine learning world. But again, it doesn't start with that machine learning capability. It starts with what is the problem, what are you trying to solve, what does your mission need? And so I think this is the number one way to cut through the hype. I'll let Fletcher maybe add and then maybe have a response.
I agree completely. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, there was this wave across IBM of everybody saying, I just need to hire some DevOps people, and nobody really knew what that was. And then, you know, I think a couple of years ago, blockchain was kind of in that category of, you know, some people saying, I need a blockchain and not really knowing what that is, and other people saying, well, why don't I just use a database? What's the difference? And in the time in between, that has become real, and we have real production use cases running in the IT department inside of IBM around things like I'll just name a couple really quick ones. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, but contingent labor. IBM has a lot of contractors, and we spend a lot of money with augmented staffing agencies and so on. And at any given time, there can be north of $130 million of capital that we have to set aside for time card claiming disputes. Not everybody around the world claims their week the same way, and some people don't keep good records of it, and it's in emails, and it's in spreadsheets, and by the time they get paid, it's been a couple of weeks, and then when they recognize that there's been a discrepancy, that takes, in some cases, on average, 2 weeks and a whole bunch of emails to resolve. Creating a blockchain network with our contingent labor providers, the time to resolve those things went from 2 weeks to 2 minutes, and freed up a whole bunch of capital. And then things like cross-border tax declarations, movement of goods across the globe, a whole bunch of kind of software license management, asset management. So that's something that kind of started in that area, but has become real because we are running real mission on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing some of the same when you talk about the mission, right? We're seeing some of that around zero trust right now. Everybody's zero trust, zero trust, zero trust. I was at a conference recently, and you walk the floor, and 70% of the vendors had some sort of sign about zero trust. And really, when we sat down and we started digesting it and taking it apart, we were doing many of the zero trust concepts already. There are holes and there are gaps and there are things that we certainly need to address. But on the whole, we were already doing a number of these things. It's not like you could just go out and buy a giant box of zero trust and set it down in the data center and puppy dogs and rainbows come out. It's understanding, trying to scrape the hype away and then actually figuring out where your gaps are and then getting after the challenges. So, Fletcher, I've heard you talk a number of times about changing the culture within the organization. I mean, your company's been around for a number of years now. There is that risk of the culture growing stale and being problematic. So, how do you drive that culture within your organization to really push forward and be effective?
Well, we spend a lot of time thinking about IT as a driver of culture change. If you think, what is an organization? It's a collection of people, and the culture of an organization is a function of how work gets done. And so we very much have a philosophy of the state of IT is a reflection of what the company thinks and feels about its people. And if we really believe that, then the quality that we're delivering is not trivial. It's actually core to a strategy of creating a high-performance, highly engaged workforce. And in a large way, we're kind of in the business of meeting unmet customer needs. And to deliver that mission, having empathy is a kind of existential requirement. So we spend a lot of time in the IT department leading with design, doing user research, UCD, user research and design, to kind of understand where the friction points are. Every minute that a person spends struggling with an IT system is a minute not spent doing the thing that they were hired to do, and usually the thing that makes them feel fulfilled, and all of that erodes engagement and commitment to the mission. And so it's a huge focus for us, and if you were to ask me just kind of in a sentence, what is our strategy for IT? It is to lead with culture, which has a whole bunch of things underneath it.
Okay, and so in the academic world, I mean, that's a different take. How do you guys do it?
I can give you a take for our organization, but also sort of what we see when we interact with the rest of the world. I'll say right up front, you hear a lot about strategy, so I love this question about culture. My favorite quote about the two of them is, I think, from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think it's really important to worry about your culture if you want to make any of your strategies work at some point. I also love Fletcher's model here, where IT drives culture and enables innovation and creativity and all of these things in the workforce. I think that's exactly right. If you look across industry at the big companies that are very innovation forward, exquisite infrastructure is a differentiator for them. We actually find that from a hiring perspective. If we want to hire a high-end technologist to work with, providing them exquisite infrastructure is a differentiator. As an academic organization, we can't pay exorbitant salaries, but we can offer them great problems to work on and exquisite infrastructure to use. The other big thing I see is create a learning culture, a culture where there's some wiggle room in your day-to-day activities. This is a model that I've seen at IBM, at Google, and at other big companies where a lot of innovation is happening. You might have a job to do and requirements to build a particular system, but you have some wiggle room to go after solving that side problem that's going to enable not just you, but others across the organization. And I think that flexibility of movement is actually a really important piece of this technology innovation culture that we're after.
It's a really good point, and it reminded me that one of the dangers of a company like IBM is it can become a very insular place, and then people start to run the risk of getting a mindset that says, if we don't know how to solve a problem, it's because it's not solvable. And you know, when I ask people in my team, who is somebody in industry that you think does a better job of this than you do that you admire, you should know the answer to that question. If you don't, you're not on top of your field. And so I like what you said about being a culture of learning. That's been a big sustained focus for us along with some other things. But you know, there are billions of people in the world. Someone has figured out how to do this, perhaps better than we have. Go find that person, learn from them, and figure out how we can bring that back into our organization.
No, absolutely valid points. I had a mentor of my own one time. He was a former boss and then later became a mentor. And when I went back and asked him what made the organization that we worked in innovative, you know, his idea was that very similar to what you guys are talking about, but he was able, within the government, his job was to guard us from the bureaucracy, right? So his job was to keep the bureaucracy at bay and enable us to do our thing, and he had faith and trust in us as the technologists to do things, deliver, and actually produce, and we did. It was a great and wonderful time.
Which is an important mission. Every year in our survey, bureaucracy is the #1 complaint from employees. And so while we're generally the ones creating the bureaucracy and the problems, we're also the ones empowered to solve it, and yes. So it helps motivate us.
Absolutely. So can you tell us, one of the things, I've seen it time and time again and read about it time and time again, the idea of transition. So playing with new technology is frankly kind of easy. It's the fun part of our jobs. It's the part that everybody enjoys. You're playing with the toys, but at the end, it's got to come to a point where it transitions, or else it was all for naught. So can you guys talk about how you and your organizations actually transition things over? And you know, make them real from a R&D kind of state into a, no kidding, it's out for real use.
So as a university with a government research lab that's part of it, well, we use all the mechanisms for transition and tech transfer. We've worked so the government lab, the FFRDC that I'm a part of, we've worked in collaboration with faculty, places like Incremental and government sponsors all at once, including a company, a startup company, where we were working on evaluating their technology, making improvements to, say, a scheduling algorithm or something like that, and actually transitioning that directly to the company that then is transitioning it back to the government. So there's all kinds of different models. I mentioned the 300 faculty at CMU that are working in AI. I think there's 150 startup companies attached to them, so there's this very ready path to transitioning, that's real transfer of technology to the commercial world. We use all of those mechanisms. That's really all I can say.
Well, IBM has a huge research department, and certainly we take advantage of the research department to solve some of the more difficult IT challenges. I think over time, one of the learnings we've had is there is a difference between building something in a lab and having it be at the scale that it can operate for 400,000 people in 170 countries. And it's a different skill set of how you operationalize those things for scale. And so we have kind of regular checkpoints and discussions with our research teams. And when something looks like it may have promise for application inside of the IT department, we will seed kind of infrastructure and design and some of the critical skills that we think are needed to make something really scalable and successful into the research team, and then have it come back out into something that we feel confident we can take over and stand behind, so that it doesn't show up at our doorstep as a sick baby, like, you know, hey, we like this thing, but it falls apart when more than 20,000 people use it.
And that's similar to kind of the approach that our new emerging technology director we're trying to take, in that we have to understand the challenges within the projects, the programs, what have you, within the rest of the agency, within the department. And if we're just chasing technology and working with technology, we will likely come to a point where it's ready for transition and there won't be anyone there to catch it, because they've either diverged or they've been driven in a different direction or what have you. So we're trying to drive the idea that it's very important that we stay very tightly bound and integrated with, you know, what is potentially the inheriting program office, so that when it's ready, there's a smooth transition and they go to town.
That gets back to the problem and mission focus, right? Stay connected to that mission owner, that mission need.
Yep.
And then another thing I mentioned earlier is incremental iterative development, of course, right? That's how you go from building or designing for 1 to scaling to 10 to deploying for 100, or pick your orders of magnitude you need to scale to. Lots of iteration is key. That's how you'll find out what does scale and what doesn't scale.
And I think for us, it's been really helpful to have better discipline around our backlog management. So every year we do this kind of fall plan budgetary exercise, and in years past, the way that system was set up incentivized the behavior of what is the minimum amount of work I can do for the maximum number of people so as to avoid being escalated, but really maybe deliver nothing or not as much as you would like to a level of excellence. And so getting a better transparent process, leveraging Agile as a way of working, and saying, you know, you've submitted this many units of demand, we have this much capacity for supply, we'll go through the backlog with the business, you tell me which ones are more important than the others, and then this is what we're locked in to do, and this is how work comes in at the top and gets prioritized. There can't be these side channel attacks of so-and-so approved it, you got to do it. That really helped us with this problem.
Okay, so one of the things that we often face the challenge of is that willingness to fail. So you know, we all want to be successful. We all want to hold something up in front of the boss and say, "Look at what we did! Rah rah! This is great and wonderful." But the reality is if we don't fail occasionally, we're really probably not pushing hard enough, and we're not trying to move the ball far enough. But the reality with any failure is you need to parlay what you got from that failure and into the next thing, so that 1, you don't make the same mistakes again, and 2, you are moving that ball forward in a sense. So can you guys talk about in either of your cases where there's something that you did work on, a technology that your organization chased that, well, maybe didn't pan out so well, but the reality is it helped you in other areas? That's a thorny one, I know, isn't it?
It never happens.
Or always happens.
Microchannel.
Well, I remember we put a lot of energy and time and money into Second Life. Anybody remember Second Life?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
IBM was convinced that this was going to be like the next internet. People were going to come there and have this kind of immersive 3D virtual world environment. And we bought virtual real estate and built all these IBM offices and customer briefing centers and product showcases and things. And I'm pretty sure for the last 5 years, there's an avatar that looks kind of like me, just walking into the wall, stuck in Second Life forever. But you know, obviously that didn't pan out, and we ended up walking away from it. But I think the thing that we did take away from that exercise was it forced us to really look differently at the customer experience and place a different value on the kind of total end-to-end customer experience, and lead with a more you know, engineer from the user in, not from ourselves out.
No, that's great.
The example that I think of as far as where I've failed to adopt technology successfully is actually going way back to my time in government. Before the iPhone, there were companies working on multi-touch. I can't remember the name of the actual company. I think Jeff Hahn was the president of the company that we were working with. Everyone knows the magic board on CNN now that they use for election nights. That was the first instance of a purchase of this multi-touch screen that we were looking at. And I bought the second. The problem was I forgot that I should be mission-driven and focused on a problem rather than enamored with technology. And so we bought this multi-touch screen and then never did anything with it, as far as I can tell. It's definitely cool technology, but it does require this user experience design and other things like that, driven by a mission problem. Maybe just a few other comments on failure. I actually am not a fan of the fail fast belief. I feel like it is trying to fail. I prefer phrases like make better mistakes or these kinds of things. Where it's okay to take risks. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. But this, getting back to this learning culture, and again, fail fast, make better mistakes. These are all about agile, incremental development activities. And I think that's probably the #1 lesson, right? Especially in the IT technology world, where things are moving so fast and there's new ideas coming at you all the time. Try it out, increment all the time. Don't try to write a batch of requirements and do development for many years, right? We know better than that at this point.
Fail fast is a bad way of saying recover quickly.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll take our lumps too. We've had our challenges with a variety of things over the years. One in particular that stood out and continues to pay dividends is we did a prototype with a cloud vendor. This was years ago. What we were trying to do was limit what we saw as the risks of a SAML, the security assertion markup language. We had some concerns with the security of it, and we were trying to limit the risks of that when dealing with a cloud provider, actually more of a SaaS provider. So we did a bunch of things. We put some proxies in the way. We thought we had it. We thought we had it nailed. We were going to do these great and wonderful things. The reality is that we learned a number of things from it, but the reality is that cloud was changing too fast in order for us to be able to put these appliances in the way and intercept the authentication and do things with the traffic. So, but from that, we ultimately we've gained a lot of knowledge, and we've used that moving forward as we've rolled out other SaaS solutions, other cloud solutions, and we've been able to gain that corporate knowledge and then not hit those same stumbling blocks again and again. So here's a fun one. What technologies do you all see on the horizon that the hype machine has not gotten to yet? So what's coming that none of these folks in the room, this is your chance. This is your chance. Nobody's ever heard of this stuff before. You're going to release it here at AFCEA. No, probably not. But what's coming that perhaps we're not necessarily tracking yet?
I'll say the power of the hype machine is very strong.
The hype machine is a monster.
I mean, I could give a couple of different answers here. I'll say something I think might be controversial to some. We are only just starting to scratch the surface in AI and machine learning. So while the hype machine has definitely caught on for deep learning and deep neural nets and machine learning more generally, it is very much just the beginning. We have, a lot to learn about how these systems work, how they generalize, how they scale. And then there's a lot of techniques that are underexplored that are starting to show some amazing promise. At organizations like OpenAI, that is doing a lot of work with reinforcement learning, which is the process of learning to control a physical system without having to program it, without having a control engineer write down the rules for it. And so I'd say AI and machine learning, because the hype hasn't gotten off of deep learning yet into these other promising areas. And then there's quantum, but I think Fletcher might be better off to talk about quantum. Our experience with quantum was actually at an IBM hackathon, so I might defer to you on that one.
Well, I agree on quantum, and actually I agree on the AI piece too. I guess first on the AI side, there is a lot of hype around AI and a lot of fear around it, and most of the questions I get are some variant of, is it going to kill us all or take our jobs?
We've all seen Terminator.
Yeah.
We know how it goes.
But I think, most of what the big kind of consumer companies have been working on is narrow AI, of doing like image classification or some kind of quality inspection in a manufacturing process, or organizing the pictures on your phone, and all of that is useful, but it's not terribly transformative. And then all the way at the other end would be kind of general artificial intelligence. And I think mastery of language will be the shortest path to close the gap between narrow and general AI. And so that will be really, I think, when you start to see that hype machine really spin up, because current AI systems require the answer to a question to exist in the data somewhere. But that's not the case if you can reason. And that then becomes the equivalent of reading and writing, where you can then answer questions to which there was no previously known answer. And so I think that will be when we really start to see some exciting things happen with AI. On the quantum side, I agree. I think it's early days on the hype cycle for that, early days in the quantum technology. It is, I think a true statement that eventually quantum will be able to make or break every known encryption in a matter of seconds, discover new drugs. It's a completely different approach to computing than counting, which is the basis of all current computing. And so we'll see, I think, these kind of hybrid systems of traditional compute plus quantum to be able to do the things that quantum is really good at in short bursts. And as it's less about the number of qubits and more about the stability and accuracy of those qubits. But I think that's going to unlock a whole different field of computing. It's possible that we've been programming computers just the wrong way for the last X number of years, and quantum is really a much closer approximation to how nature figures things out. And so, Elon Musk says there's a 40% chance we're living in a computer simulation. You'd think things would work better if that was the case, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of headroom on quantum. That's going to be a very exciting field.
Yeah, I think just at the risk of smashing buzzwords together, Fletcher mentioned, quantum will someday in the foreseeable future be able to break all encryption. I think far sooner you're going to see applications in AI and machine learning, because there are hard computational problems that aren't NP hard, if you know that language. I don't think I want to get into the explanation of that. They're not really, really hard. They're not near intractable, but they are hard. They're expensive to compute. And there's evidence that suggests that quantum or quantum-inspired algorithms are starting to show significant speed-ups for things like machine learning systems.
And I don't think there's maybe as much hype as you would expect there to be around AI in the cyber realm. Right? I mean, if you ask any cybersecurity professional about what keeps you up at night, it's AI-augmented threats. Because if you can iterate millions of times a second on some sort of piece of malware, I mean, it's very hard to defend against that. The only thing that can combat AI is more AI, which will be an interesting field.
So one last question before we get into questions from the audience. So it's graduation season. We probably likely don't have a lot of graduates in the audience today, but probably a lot of parents of some graduates. What do you think in our field? What would you advise either recent grads or incoming students to pursue as their degrees going forward? What are the fields that in the 4-year time frame, in the 5-year? I mean, we've talked a lot about AI and ML. That's clearly would be a wonderful. It's where I'm trying to get my daughters to kind of migrate to. But what are some other areas where you would advise a recent grad, if they came to you, where should you go?
Well, I guess it depends if the question is what's going to make me happy or what's going to get me a job that makes a lot of money. But I would generally say, when I get asked what are you looking for when you hire people, I'm looking to hire people who are kind, passionate about their craft, and believe in our mission. Right? I need patriots, not mercenaries. And we got to surround ourselves with those kinds of teammates, and we'll be successful at whatever problem we happen to be trying to solve. But I think in terms of what are going to be growth fields for IT, for sure, cyber, AI, data science, blockchain. I think if you want to do anything in the infrastructure realm, having a foundational understanding of networking is really essential. That creates a very good base for anything else. I guess more broadly, figure out what you love to do and then find someone to pay you to do it.
That's key. So coming from a university.
Right. So I have a 15-year-old, full disclosure, so we're having this conversation.
Yep.
I like this idea, do what you love, probably. Do what you're passionate about. I do have a degree in math and 2 graduate degrees in computer science, so you might be surprised at what I'm about to say. I think for people going into undergrad, they should go where they can learn a lot of different things. And so some might call this a liberal arts education or something like that. What I mean is just well-rounded. Learn about what leadership means, learn about how to think and take philosophy classes, learn about design thinking, learn about systems thinking, learn about computational thinking, and then study focus your studies on whatever you're passionate about. I caveat all of that with, so get a very well-rounded education as an undergrad, but do a minor in computer science. I think it's really important. What I'm seeing from where I sit is that in every field, computing, computational thinking, computer science, software engineering, cyber, it's all there. We do, at CMU, I should advertise this, I guess, we do offer an undergraduate degree in artificial intelligence now. It's the first of its kind. We also have an undergraduate degree in computational biology, which is run out of the School of Computer Science. So this is what I mean by you're starting to see these, a biology degree that's very much inspired by computer science. So no matter where you want to go, I think we're just going to see more and more technology around us. And if you understand how that technology works and can introspect it a little bit, you're going to be far better off no matter what career path you end up taking down the road.
Yeah, I mean, just to foot stomp what you guys are already saying, but the folks in my time that I've worked with that are uber passionate about what they're doing, they're clearly enjoying it. They're the folks that are going home and working after hours on things. They're the ones that have the labs at home. They're the ones that are really pushing it, and to the skills will develop. If the passion's there, I can take anybody with passion and love to work with those folks, because those are the folks that make me want to get out of bed in the morning and make me want to come to work and work alongside of them. So yeah, the passion thing is definitely key, regardless of whether you're 18, 38 or 58 or 78, right? It's the passion that really makes the employee.
I'll take curiosity over experience any day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So with that, why don't we take some questions from the folks in the audience?
Yes. From a national security perspective, what do you see as the two most critical technologies in the next 7 to 10 years?
So I think we're probably going to go back to the AI ML trough is probably one of the early ones. I mean, that's like to Fletcher's point earlier. You got to battle it AI with AI. So as these other nation states are investing heavily in that technology, we need to be making similar investments.
Yeah, I mean, as an IBM employee, I'm very optimistic about the future of AI, but as an American, we cannot lose the AI advantage. So I think it's extremely critical that it's not like traditional compute where you only have to be a little bit better than somebody to have a really big problem on your hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing to add about AI, especially from a national security perspective, is that AI, I'm a machine learning person. It's very much a craft right now, right? Almost a black art to build one of these deep learning systems, a computer vision system, those sorts of things. There are people that are really good at it, but it's not a professional engineering discipline. And I would say from a national security perspective, a focus on an AI, ML engineering discipline would make a huge difference. I'll give one example of why I think this is so important. A technology area, buzzwords, that it might sound like buzzwords, that is really interesting is this space called adversarial machine learning. It actually started as a way of training neural networks where you don't need as much data to train them, but it turns out that you can use this technology to spoof machine learning systems as well. The canonical examples are, inserting noise into an image of a panda to fool a computer vision system into thinking it's a gibbon. You may have also seen the eyeglasses that a professor at CMU is 3D printing to fool facial recognition systems. This adversarial machine learning idea is a great way to get at testing of machine learning systems, test and evaluation, V&V, from a DoD speak perspective. We've got to build up the discipline of doing that kind of thing, right? In traditional software, you might call it fuzz testing or concolic execution to find bugs or whatever it is. These ideas like adversarial machine learning provide a robust testing framework, and so I think AI engineering is a difference maker. Not just the rapid adoption of AI and ML, but doing it in a smart way where you know where the vulnerabilities of it are, where you know where it might fail in certain situations. A thing we haven't talked about is space. I think there's a lot of innovation happening in the space domain, in particular driven by commercial space companies that are doing amazing things with small satellites. So I think that's another technology that is going to be very critical in the national security space moving forward.
Just on the AI, I mean, you reminded me of a really important point, which in the near future, malware is not going to be about getting you to click on a link in an email to install some piece of code on your computer. It's going to be about using the minimum amount of data required to corrupt a data set that something like a vision recognition system is using. With a surprisingly small amount of data, you can get an autonomous driving system to think that a stop sign is a green light. And that's a fairly benign use case. Now imagine financial systems, medical systems, critical infrastructure. So AI is very closely related to a big data problem and data integrity.
Absolutely. On the space comment, you know, I read an article recently that talked about how, you know, the space industry is sort of the next internet, if you will, and the number of things that it's done to change our world. The space, granted, look at all the things going back, you know, from the space program thus far that have been introduced into our world, and now with the private corporations getting involved in it, just iterating so much faster, what's going to come to our worlds from that is also very, very intriguing. Next question.
What is the largest stumbling block to taking advantage of emerging technology and your recommendation to overcoming it?
Let me, if I can take a crack at that one first. That one's I like that one. So when we were first standing up our group at DISA, the Emerging Technology Group, our Directorate, we were talking about some of the things that have been deployed in the agency recently. And we were talking about one technology in particular. I won't get into what it was, but one of the folks in the group actually let out a little snicker. And the reason is that they were, they didn't agree with the path that we had chosen and what we had gone through. And later, he and I sat down and had a conversation about the right technology for a given situation, right? So there's greenfield perfect tech, and then there's the right technology for a given situation. And, you know, would we have chosen the path that we had taken if we had gone completely greenfield and in a perfect world? No. But oftentimes it's finding the right mix. I've given the example many times before. It's Betamax versus VHS, right? Betamax was the superior technology, but ultimately VHS is the one that won out because it was in the right place at the right time and it was the right solution for then. Still a fine technology, but it wasn't the, you know, it wasn't the top of its time. So in my mind, it's not pursuing and chasing what you see as the absolute best. It's that mixture. It's figuring out how do I get from the point that I'm at right now forward with the right technology for that given situation.
I like the Betamax VHS example. I mean, a lot of people go down in history being right and losing. And, you know, the Betamax was the better technology for sure. But I think as a species, we're not really seeking change and disruption, right? People's natural position is to seek stability. And in a large organization like IBM or others, there's a natural resistance to disruption. We've got this thing, it's up and running, I understand it, I know how to care and feed for it. And I've built a whole cottage industry around other jobs that are related to it. And so I think creating a culture where people understand, and then we actually reward this behavior, that the greatest success somebody can have to some degree is working themselves out of a job so they can move to higher order tasks. The absence of that is the answer to the question. I think that becomes an obstacle in large organizations to embracing change.
I think I already provided the answer that I always give to this question. Don't be technology enamored. Be problem motivated, right? Focus on the problem first, not the shiny new technology. I see it over and over. People are always trying to drive from the technology side, and I've just seen it fail so many times.
Okay. Next question.
What changes would you make to the public education system to promote increased competitiveness in the world of technology?
I'm going to look at the guy from the university.
So we have this reading, writing, arithmetic, 3 disciplines model. We need to add computational thinking, and I might even argue now that we need to add AI as a curriculum in K-12. It's that simple. Computational thinking is critical. I can tell you I've done with my kids, I've taught them machine learning with Dixie cups, a simple game, and M&Ms. So you don't need a computer to do these things, or unloading a dishwasher can be a distributed computing problem. That's a way of saying, help me unload the dishwasher, in case you didn't follow.
I need to get some notes from you on that when we're done.
So that's how I would change it. And then there's, this is probably too far, and I'm stepping over any bounds I should keep out of. But sort of the emphasis on standardized testing is probably limiting in a lot of cases.
Well, IBM has a big push for what they're calling new-collar jobs, which is this belief that you really don't need a traditional 4-year college education to participate in the new economy.
Until we tell them to stop, yeah.
And
We've got a hot mic.
and I certainly agree with that. I think if you look at the cost of education and the trend that it's on, it's just not sustainable. And as a country is a threat to our well-being, I think, if we continue down a path where only a very select few people can afford to get a 4-year degree, that would not be a good outcome. And if you haven't read a book by Peter Thiel's got a lot of really strange ideas, but he talks a lot about education and how, in his estimation, you don't really buy an education. You buy kind of an insurance policy against getting a really bad job, and that's not a good reason to go to college. And so, I'm not an educator, and I'm not really qualified to give an answer on the question, but I would say I think it's pretty clear that you can have a very successful career in the new and emerging technologies without a traditional 4-year degree.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, a lot of the best engineers that I've worked with are not your traditionally classically trained engineers. They are, they are folks that have come up through the organization, and they've done a number of things, technically speaking, but don't have that formal, degree hanging on the wall. So no, 100% agree with both of you. I'm often frustrated with watching my own children's education and wishing they were doing more IT related or more technically related in their in their own schools. So next question.
This is the final question. Could the panel each identify maybe 2 truths about artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as 2 misunderstandings? It would also be interesting to understand their view of where AI, ML may show unexpected or surprising successes in DoD.
Wow. A multi-parter for the end. All right, so 2 truths and 2 potentially. So
well done. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it, guys?
I had to
So I'll take a quick stab at this one. I probably won't hit all the points, but I'll take a quick stab at it. The 2 truths, I mean, it's already paying off, and it's already used in a number of the things that we're doing now. Let me actually start with one of the misnomers first, is that you can't just run out, to my previous example, and buy a big box of machine learning and AI and everything's going to be awesome, right? So constantly running up against that where we just need to go out and buy some, or we need to develop some, or what have you. It's integrated into a number of the things that we're already doing. Yesterday, the director talked about our assured identity pilot, where we've got a mobile handset and we're watching, continuously monitoring someone's gait, how they use the device, that kind of thing. In the background, well, that's machine learning that's doing that. There's a model, and the data's constantly being compared to that model, and then we're getting an output, and then we're watching to make sure that output doesn't go below a certain threshold. So we're already doing that in places already. There are a number of, it's going to impact every aspect of our business, but there are, it's not like we're going to run out and just buy a box of it and call it a day. Gentlemen?
Well, I think I'm not going to answer the whole question set, but just sort of 2 quick things. I think it's a fallacy, this idea that there's a finite size of the labor pie and that AI is going to take all of our jobs. it is going to impact almost every job, and that innovation is coming at us faster and will affect a larger segment of jobs than previous things like the sewing machine, electric light bulb, and so on. But it's expansive. If you think about 20 years ago, nobody was building mobile apps either. It will develop a whole new field for people to be able to have a successful career in. But the rate and pace of it is a challenge. Really tactically, you know, if I was in charge for a day, I would compel the tier ones to take known bad actor traffic off their backbones. That'd be the thing I'd do to help the DoD, but that's unrelated to, I mean, you would use AI to do it, but that's more of a nit.
So very briefly, AI and machine learning are not magic. If anyone tells you they're magic, they're fooling you. Also, this idea that we're near the point where AI is going to take on a life of its own. It's going to start doing this artificial general intelligence. Right now, the state of the art in machine learning is humans design an objective function that a statistical inference mechanism optimizes for. I actually think machine learning as a phrase is a bit misleading. It could just be called statistical inference from large data. So those are two fallacies. Where I think I'm most excited for potential breakthroughs, I mentioned earlier on this idea of reinforcement learning. We're just now getting to the point where we're starting to scale reinforcement learning to practical problems. And I know places like AFRL and DARPA now have programs to learn the control patterns for air-to-air combat. Who knows if they'll actually pan out or not? There's a lot of hard problems in there, but it's pretty exciting if we can get to that point.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. I think we're about done here. So thank you all for coming out this morning. Appreciate your time and attention. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yeah, give them a hand, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We, you know, we're talking all of the technology advances. We can't even get a fire started up front. But
I had a torch, and the guards took it from me. Something about our security deposit. So
well, we thank you so much. You're a lucky audience. I think the insights you heard here about technology, breakthroughs, limitations, advances, all important for an understanding of where we're going with the required capabilities and available capabilities in the department. I appreciate the discussion, Matthew, on mission link and problem oriented. You know, I certainly can walk away with that, absolutely. And frankly, I think I met you in Second Life. You and Elon were playing cards or something in Second Life. If you remember that, that was a remarkable initiative at the time. Thank you so much for your insights, your perspectives. And on behalf of AFCEA and our audience, we will present a donation to Fisher House on your behalf. Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's give them a hand again.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move next into a networking break on the exhibit floor, and it'll run till luncheon. Lunch today, which is sponsored by AT&T, features a keynote address from General Bruce Crawford, the Army CIO G6. I'd ask you to please be seated by 11:55 as we get started on time. We take advantage as well to, there's an app that has a page on where the DISA leaders will be seated. Please take a chance to look at that. And there's another set of theater sessions waiting for you outside. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.